Well, hello and welcome to the Zero-One Show. This is a talk show where we're going to be taking callers from both atheists and theists alike. This is the show where you get to ask your questions and raise your own topics, and we're here to answer any questions or discuss any topics that you have. So please, if you want to call in, please do. There is a link in the chat. You click on that link and you put in the password 420 and you will be added to the show. We don't have any moderators in the back working in the background tonight, so if you could kindly leave a message in the chat that you're wanting to join, and we will shout you out when we are ready to take your call. So joining me tonight we have Scott Williamson. How are you doing tonight, Scott?
I am doing wonderful.
That's good to hear. I will play a quick intro for this show, and then we'll get right into it. Yeah, so joining me tonight we have Scott Williamson. You doing okay tonight, Scott?
Oh man, doing wonderful. Doing so
Good,
wonderful
good.
tonight.
Yeah, sorry about the intro. I forgot to resize that from last show, which was in 720p, so you only had a quarter of the screen there for the intro. That's a bit annoying, but anyway. um, yeah, so have you been up to much lately, Scott? While we're waiting for our first callers?
Uh no, I'm ready to go, man. I've just got off, doing my daily stuff today and all settled in and ready to and just looking forward to jumping in on the program and taking calls and having really nice deep discussions about God and religion and atheism and you name it. Bring it on.
Yeah, I'm all psyched up for this as well. We were chatting on Monday with Ontangelo and Cafe, who both said that they wanted to call in. So hopefully we get. Obviously, last week we had a few issues when Ontangelo called in with the stream. So I'm hoping he calls back in for for stage 2 of the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We had a really nice conversation last time, talking about irreducible complexity. I think is what we
Yeah,
were talking about, and evolution, really abiogenesis versus creationism. And so I was actually doing a little research in preparation for tonight's show,
mm,
and I ran across a really good um, article by Sean Carroll, who's a physicist, and he was talking about complexity in closed systems. And there's actually an article he called "Quantifying the Rise and Fall of Complexity in Closed Systems," and he uses the coffee automaton as a kind of analogy to kind of explain that.
mm.
So it's really kind of interesting, and I'd like to run it by someone like Otangelo to see what their thoughts may be on that analogy and kind of see what they're thinking, because they obviously with the argument from fine tuning is that complexity seems to indicate an intelligent designer, right?
Mm.
But physicists like Sean Carroll actually have a different viewpoint, and they say that actually entropy can explain a lot of the complexity we see in the universe, including consciousness. And so there's an analogy that he gives regarding like a coffee cup cooling, you know, and creating entropy and low entropy from a low complex state to a higher complex state and on out. So it's a really interesting sort of alternative to the fine tuning argument, and I think that it'd make for a good conversation. I think.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely sounds like really. I'm glad that you did research on that because sometimes when Antangelo's talking about some of these concepts, I do get a little bit lost. Um, with where he's taking some of these concepts.
Right, because the thing about it is it's very understandable to see the complexity in the universe and just kind of infer that there must be some kind of designer involved in it, because after all, we make very complex systems like cars, like computers, for example. It takes an intelligent being like humans to actually design such things, and how much more so complex is the universe compared to like a car or a computer. So it's sort of very easy to imagine that some sort of divine God or greater mind or superhuman, so to speak, could be behind that, And
See, I have a problem with that though, is because, obviously for a car or for an iPhone or for a plane or what have you, then yeah, it makes sense. We know that those things are built and that complexity only comes about through us building those things. But when it comes to naturalistic things like the universe or us, then we have no evidence that those naturalistic things needed a creator. There is no evidence for that. So it's sort of a null argument in my opinion. Until you
yes.
can provide evidence that we have seen those natural things needing a creator, then it's a pointless argument.
Yeah, and that's really requires a little bit of deeper thinking to get where you're at, because obviously it's very intuitive for people to just assume that something complex requires an intelligent creator, because after all, we create complex things, or not even that complex things. They require creators. So the average person naturally sort of assumes that, hey, look at a simple flagellum. It looks like a machine. And we know that humans create machines, and flagellums are sort of like machines. So common sense kind of tells us that, obviously, flagellum are created by some sort of designer. That's the thinking, at least. That's the intuitive mind at work. But as you mentioned, there's reasons to kind of question that. If you just think about it a little bit, there's, you can question that. You can wonder, well, is it really necessary for an intelligent designer like a human, or something like a human, like a superhuman, to be involved in that? And I think what it is that people have this idea, this concept, that nature is blind, that nature doesn't have a mind. Only humans have minds. So how in the world could nature create a machine? That's just absurd, right? Well, as it turns out, that over long periods of time, we have this thing called emergent properties. And with these emergent properties, you get all sorts of complex designs in nature, things that you could consider a design. And so it just requires a little education and a little observation of how things work to actually see it in action. And we actually do have really good evidence that from a blind process, very organized systems can emerge, things that we would call emergent systems. And so it's not very intuitive, but they do exist. And it's just a matter of people being open-minded enough to look into the evidence to see how these things are possible.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to shout out quickly. For anyone who's in the chat and wants to call in, please post in the chat if you want to call in, and we will post a link for you to call in. Just make sure you have a question or a topic that you want to be discussed, and we'll make that happen for you. I also like to shout out that we have in the chat with us right now, we have Cat the Humanist, welcome. We have KCA Randy, another regular of ours. Thank you for joining us again. And we also have Wes with us. Atheist Mama Bear, how are you doing tonight? And also we have a new viewer at the Cross. Welcome to the stream. Haven't seen you here before, so thank you very much for joining us. I'd also like to shout out before we continue the conversation, Scott, that I do have a new line of merchandise on my merch store for any of the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses out there, or anyone who just doesn't want Jehovah's Witnesses knocking at their door anymore. I have the Beware of the Apostate line of posters, t-shirts, stickers, things like that. And if you wear one of those while a Jehovah's Witness is knocking at your door, I can guarantee they won't be coming back again. And if you put one of them in your window, well, I can guarantee they won't knock in the first place. So
yeah, so
yeah, sorry about that, Scott. I just wanted to
oh yeah, absolutely.
shout
Absolutely.
out.
We want more callers. We want people to actually call in and give us conversation. It doesn't have to be about, abiogenesis or creation. It can be about any topic really related to religion and Jehovah's Witnesses, or any religion for that matter. That's what we love to do. And we had, expressed interest for folks to call into the show talking about perennialism. And so I kind of look forward to that conversation. So yeah, we're open. We love to dialogue and talk about this stuff and get it out. We think this is healthy, that we can have really good conversations about touchy subjects.
Yeah, that did interest me. The perennialism. To be fair, I've never actually really heard too much about it. So I'm guessing it's something to do with the perineal gland.
No, actually, it's kind of looking at the commonality. I think the main thrust of the philosophy is that there's a main commonality with all religions, specifically with mystical experiences. And so mystical experiences are sort of a very common experience that most people have. It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or what denomination of Christianity, or if you're a Muslim. There's mystical experiences with some mystics in the realm of Islam, and also with New Age spiritualism. And so I think perennialism, the way that I understand it, and I may not be that, much of an expert on it, but it's basically looking at that commonality of the mystical experience and of God. And a lot of what perennialists will kind of bring up is some of the more recent scientific studies regarding the mystical experience, and that how they are sort of ineffable. And this ineffability gives people reason to see a value in these mystical experiences and finding these commonalities. And so perennialism is sort of a philosophy, but it kind of draws on that idea that, mystical experiences are not fallacious, that these things are common among people of different religions, and they seek to kind of explain the commonality and explain how meaningful these things can be. And so that's from what I understand about the philosophy.
So is it to do with is it still a supernatural sort of belief that these mystical experiences are somehow separate from our reality in some way, or like the higher state of our existence?
It depends on who you speak to. I think with anything else, you've got different interpretations. For most perennialists that I've spoken to, they sort of look at the whole supernatural natural dichotomy as a kind of false dichotomy. So they kind of look at it like those two concepts are kind of made up or arbitrary. In fact, many perennialists that I speak to say that there's just reality, and that's what it is. So these experiences happen, whether you want to say they're natural or supernatural, whatever that means, it doesn't really matter. The point is that these experiences do happen, and they happen with anyone. It doesn't really matter whether you're an atheist or a Buddhist. Buddhists are atheists in many cases, or Islam, if you're a Muslim or a Christian. These sort of experiences are not special depending on the particular religion that you adhere to, or if no religion at all. But this experience is a common thing. It's a common thread. So they seek to explain these things through looking at the commonality and, first of all, acknowledging that these things happen and that they're meaningful and they can provide some sort of meaning. And a lot of people draw the fact that this experience in itself is God. It's sort of like defining God as these sort of experiences that people have, right? So it's kind of like a philosophical argument for God based on the mystical experience.
I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot, my thoughts on it is there's a lot that we don't understand about the human brain still. And, especially when it comes to, the reason why certain people have certain experiences, such as mystical experiences. But, the way I look at it is the lack of knowledge in that area, is that enough to say that it must be something higher than our understanding, something higher than our existence? Wouldn't it be more logical to think that there's just a part of the naturalistic world that to do with our brains that we don't yet understand fully?
Right. And I think that kind of goes to a language barrier. It's a language thing. Perennialism or perennial wisdom is sort of just a perspective. It's kind of like in philosophy or spirituality, a kind of viewpoint that the world's religious traditions are sharing some single metaphysical truth or origin from which all esoteric or exoteric knowledge or doctrines can grow from, right? So that's kind of no different than an atheist saying that, well, spirituality and religion, it all comes from the mind of humans. And so there's this common trait in humans that gives birth to these different ideas of metaphysics and religion and things of that nature. And so they're kind of saying the same thing, but they kind of lace it with a certain vernacular and a certain grammar that maybe appeals to more spiritual minded people to say, yeah, this kind of explains why, and the positive thing on that, I may be able to say that it's kind of a way to seek some sort of commonality to where, hey, look, I'm a Muslim, you're a Christian, but guess what? we all worship the same thing. We all come from the same place. We're all drawing from the same truth, as it were, you know? So, in a way, you can say it's sort of positive in that sense of the word. But I think that, you know, atheism can be the same thing. Like, you can be an atheist and have a certain awe of the universe or a certain spiritual outlook or viewpoint or, you know, subjective feeling about reality. That's the exact same thing. You don't need all this religious lingo to sort of legitimize it, if you will. You know, why can't we just look at nature and look at science and look at reality and just think, you know, this is great. This is, you know, there's no need for all this division and things of that nature. But I think that perennialism is sort of a way to kind of bridge that gap. That's the attempt. That's the way I see it. I don't know. I may be wrong. Maybe someone can call in and correct us. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's people who want to call in. You know, there's nobody waiting as of yet in the background. So, you know, please do, if you do have a question, please, you know, feel free to click on the link and put in the password and join in. We'd love to talk to you. If you don't want to call in, but you still got a question or a topic for us to discuss, then, you know, feel free to leave that in the chat as well. We can definitely do that and, you know, discuss it between ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody can call in. You don't have to feel shy. If you're religious, we'd love to speak to you. If you're not, we can speak about any of the subjects that you want. It's all good. We you know, what we want to do is foster communication and understanding, and I think that's really helpful, you know, in today's climate. I mean, there's so much division and there's so many echo chambers, and this is kind of an attempt to get out of the echo chamber and have that dialogue. I mean, it's real easy for atheists to exist within atheist groups and talk about atheism and put down religion and things of that nature. And that's really something that's been done countless amount of times. But, you know, we can, you know, we're one of these groups that want to actually have that dialogue with people of different viewpoints and perspectives, you know?
Yeah, oh, definitely. You know, there's nothing worse than an echo chamber, really, when when you just always talking with people who have exactly the same view as you. There's the discourse that tends to get a little bit boring. I mean, it is nice talking to people who have the same view, but you know, for unlike what a lot of apologists will say about atheists, that we're just another religion, we just got another doctrine, and that's all we're interested in is, you know, peddling our own views out to other people. That's completely false. I mean, there may be some atheists out there who do have that thought, but on a whole, the majority of atheists, we want to discuss, the topics at hand with other people, and have that conversation. Oh, we have a caller. Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. This is Mama Bear. In case you didn't
hello.
know.
How are you doing?
Hi. I'm sick, so excuse my voice, but I thought I'd just pop in for a moment and say hi.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. Thank you very much for calling in.
I felt bad because nobody was calling in. So.
Oh yeah, we had some people lined up who said they were going to call in, but then haven't shown up. So.
Yeah. Well, we haven't got a chance to talk to you, well, not in person, but actually speak with you. So, I've been enjoying your show.
Oh, thank you very much.
And a couple of your interviews on other shows. So, I just thought we could chat about how exciting it is being an ex-JW apostate.
Oh, it's very exciting. You know, being a Satan worshipper is brilliant, as Jehovah's Witnesses would say. Love sitting down and
Yeah.
having a cup of tea with the devil, you know.
Yes. I don't really have any questions. I just thought I'd come say hi for a minute.
Nice, thank you.
So
Were you an
yeah,
extra?
I do my apostating work on TikTok. So
Oh, nice. That's what is it that you're doing over there?
well, I started because I wanted to. I didn't know. So I just. It's only been 10 minutes, 10 months since I left the organization, and at the time I just thought, well, I'm going to be condemned and die at Armageddon, whatever. And then after 2 or 3 months, I finally got the courage up to start, watching like YouTube videos and things um, about from apostates. And then I didn't take long till I realized, oh wow, this is a cult. And as soon as I figured that out, I'm like, I have to tell the world because I've been stuck in a cult for 45 years and I didn't even know it. And so I decided to go. I was already an established TikToker, so I
Hmm.
decided to start a second account and I started telling my story. And then I started getting feedback and realizing there were a lot of other people on there from other cults too. And so I kind of turned it into more of a community page. So, I mean, I still focus on the ex witnesses, and we've kind of bonded with the ex Mormons as well because we kind of like cousins. So
Hmm.
that's been kind of nice. But I do a lot of posts featuring people from other cults and people who have a lot to say about religious trauma and cognitive dissonance, things like that. So just encouraging people to think critically. So it's nice. I
Oh,
mean,
that
yeah,
sounds amazing. I mean,
yeah,
that's why we all do what we do here, isn't it? It's to promote that critical thinking and to maybe sow some seeds of critical thinking in the minds of those who are trapped inside these these religious cults.
yeah. And it's been fulfilling because there's already been individuals that have been helped by it. People who were studying with the witnesses and started watching the videos, and they messaged me, "What do I do now? I should I keep studying? Should I leave?" So I just,
Good for
told
you.
them what I knew and said, "You need to decide." And they'd get back to me later and said, "I left. I broke off the study. I'm not going back," and things like that. So it's fulfilling to know that you're helping some people, and I'm always encouraging more people to speak out. So every few days or so, there's new people posting videos, telling their stories. So it's nice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've seen it happen. Throughout this pandemic, as you say, there's more and more people who are got time on their hands and they're wanting to talk about their stories, and it's just so important, that more people come out and and spread this knowledge, the deeper side of these religions. Because it's the only way that the world's going to realize that there is a darker side to all of this. It's not all love and compassion inside these cults and religions. There's definitely this darker side to it that most people don't seem to even realize exists.
Yeah.
Well,
Even
yeah,
the
and
people
that's a
that they
thing I've had
study
to
with.
explain quite a bit. That from people viewing from the outside, and then people who become new members, newly baptized, and just regular publishers, they don't realize what's going on. It's not until you get into the inner circles. And I was the same because growing up, I wasn't part of the inner circles. I had no idea. And it wasn't until I became an elder's wife that I started to see what was really going on. And I was an elder's wife for 15 years. So, yeah, just little by little, I was like, this is hypocrisy, double standards everywhere. This isn't right. So, they preach one thing and they do another. And there
Mm.
was a lot of other things, of course, too. But yeah, that's the perspective that I offer. So,
Yeah.
Well, I've not actually spoke to someone who's been an elder's wife before. I've spoke to like ex-elders and that, but I suppose it's a different perspective when you're not the one who has the power, but you're married to the person who has the power. I suppose you get a different perspective. Would you like to share anything, about that? Maybe things that you've seen.
yeah. Well, on a personal level, being an elder's wife is not fun. In fact, after a while, when new elders were appointed, and I'd go to congratulate their wife, and I'd say, "Well, congratulations," and then I'd say, "I'm sorry," because it's awful. Your husband's basically taken away from you. You don't get any time with him anymore. Especially like mine was a go-getter, and he'd take every extra assignment, volunteer for everything. Um, yeah, you feel like you're alone all the time, and they're not supposed to tell you any confidential information. And I don't know if all elders' wives have this experience, but I know my husband didn't tell me like outright things, but he'd let parts of things slip, so you had to keep things private that you heard. And then, yeah, I just saw a lot of double standards, especially in the last congregation we were in. They spend a lot of time, in meetings, counseling other people, but then we would all gather together and in get together at other elders' houses and things, have meals and stuff. All elders, families generally, and there was a lot of drinking and just scandalous types of things, and it was all hush hush. And if any of them got in trouble, they kind of got away with it with a slap on the hand sort of thing because it was all part of the club or whatever. And it was a different standard. And there's probably other things. I'm still remembering things as time goes by. So it's kind of interesting as you do more research and you'll read something or I'll watch something. My favorite is Lloyd. And he'll hit me and oh yeah, I forgot about that. So it comes back to you. But yeah, it's just not fun being the wife at all. And then even just being a wife of any witness, there's that whole subjection thing. And a lot of them take it to an extreme and require you to be super obedient, and you don't get your choice in things very much. And it's frustrating because you don't feel like you have much freedom.
And on top of that, the alternative that they're painting out for you, your alternative is going to be part of the world.
I couldn't hear what he said.
Can you hear me now? I was going to say that the alternative that they paint for people is that when you leave the truth, if you think that it's hard now, it's just going to be even harder. If you leave and go into the world, you think that your relationship is strained now. Wait till you go in the world and your husband's around all that temptation and you're around all that temptation and vice versa. And they create this real hard.
I can't hear what he's saying. I can hear you.
Oh,
I can't hear him. Can you hear him?
Yeah, I can hear him. No, he was saying that there's more that they also paint the picture that there's more temptation in the world. So if you think that your relationship is strained when you're an elder's wife and in the organisation, wait until you leave the organisation and how strained the relationship would be then.
Oh yes. Well, I started to slowly become inactive over a period of about 3 years. So my husband saw that, and at a certain point he started to consider me an apostate, and so he just kind of distanced himself from me. And eventually it just got to the point where I left because it was obvious there was nothing left there. So I can't imagine if somebody, I disassociated, but I can't imagine if somebody just faded and continued to be married to their elder husband. That would be odd. That would be difficult.
Yeah, I can, and following on from that as well. I mean, there's nothing worse when you're in the organisation to think about, what it would be like if your partner wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. Because that's you hear all these stories when you are a Jehovah's Witness of one spouse leaving the truth, as they would call it, and then all of the all of the problems that are caused by that. And
I witnessed that firsthand because when I was 6 years old, my father was disfellowshipped, but my parents remained married for another almost 10 years. And so I saw um, what that was like. My mother continued to be a faithful witness. My father regressed into an extremely, I hate to use the word worldly
mm,
lifestyle, involved in illegal activities and everything. So my home was divided with two very different lifestyles. So, yes, I don't know how they stayed together that long. It was just incredibly difficult.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people when that happens end up getting a divorce, don't they, because of the because of the stress that's caused from one spouse being out and one spouse being in.
Yeah.
It's one of the only times that they allow divorce, isn't it? Apart from adultery within the organisation.
Yeah, if the other person, or if the person who um, left off being a witness, if they're considered an apostate, um, then they can, I believe, can get divorced. I was reading it in the Shepherd the Flock book recently.
Mm.
I'd have to double check, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that you could divorce someone for that reason. I thought it was only for adultery, but apparently
Yeah.
you can.
Well, this is
So
the thing, isn't it? When you're in the organisation, they paint it as there's only one reason for divorce: adultery. That's it. And there's no other reason. But when you leave, you hear all these other stories about how the elders can punish people or divorce get put through divorces for other reasons which are less severe, like one spouse doesn't believe what you believe anymore. But I suppose it would be something that they would paint a picture so it doesn't look that way to all of the other rank and file chose witnesses, by making up some crime that they've done, like adultery or something like that, to cover the tracks.
yeah, yeah. The more I learned, the more I realized that this organization, which I also greatly associate with the board, um, is definitely not God's organization on earth. Of course, I've since become an atheist as well, so um, yeah, there's no way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so I think we're looking at it through the lens of an atheist looking back in, but it's so clear when you are looking through that lens that it's all bullshit what they're teaching. The twisting things here and there, the cherry picking things that suits their own ends. It's this whole thing of bringing reproach upon Jehovah's name. It's got nothing to do with God or anything like that. It's all to do with the power base of the people who are in charge, the human element of the organisation, and protecting their reputations.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so thank you very much for calling in, and thank you for the work that you're doing over on TikTok. I mean, it's lovely, to talk to other content creators who are who have picked up the plaque and making inroads into publicising this organisation. It's a really important work that we're doing.
Yep, saving lives. Yep, definitely. Well, it's nice to talk to you,
Yeah, thank you very much
and
for calling in.
I'm excited that you have your merch out now too.
Yeah, I've got a few lines of merch out there, but I'm creating some stuff as I go. So as I say, I've got the Beware of the Apostate line out now, and I'm
Great.
going to be doing
Check it out.
I'm going to be doing an Ignorance Isn't Bliss line as well soon. So
Nice. Well, that's great, and you guys are doing great work too. Appreciate
Oh,
appreciate
thank you
what you're
very
doing.
much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just wanted to say hi. So, take care.
Right, you too. Bye.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye bye.
Sorry she couldn't hear me.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. We've got audio coming through. It's everything's saying it's all green, so it's all good. But um, for some reason, the audio wasn't working. You were coming through on the stream though, so
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah, it's good. The more people can come out and be vocal about the harm in cults like Jehovah's Witnesses, the better. I mean, that
yeah.
goes without saying. I think it's something we're all too familiar with.
Yeah, and it's nice to actually chat with someone who, was an elder's wife, because that is you hear all these stories from elders, but you very rarely hear this the stories from people that were married to elders, and
Yeah,
got to see the other weren't they got to see what that power was actually doing, what that stress was actually doing to to a loved one, and because
yeah,
I can't imagine it's very easy for either the elder or the elder's wife in that situation. I mean, the elder has to be away from his family a lot of the time, dealing with stuff that is, very sometimes gets very seeded and horrible. Um,
right.
and the mental damage that will be doing to doing to them. But then obviously that's going to then fall over onto his family as well. They're going to be picking up on a lot of that. And as you said,
Yeah,
a lot of the time they can't tell the wives about it. The wives aren't meant to know any of this stuff.
yeah. The chain of causation doesn't end. The children, the wives, the people associated, one way or the other, are going to bear the repercussions of being part of that organization. That organization's very existence creates a ripple effect through
Yeah,
everyone involved. That's definitely negative. I mean, the only positives that they can talk about would be the false hopes. It's all false hopes, and at the end of the day, that's not positive at all. That's
yeah,
just the fuel for the negative effects. That's the fuel of it. The fact that people believe they're going to live forever. Okay, that may make people feel good, but it's not true. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's true. There's no evidence that it's true, and all the negative effects that come out of it. I mean, it is what it is. It's just a negative cult, just like anything else.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, they try to hide those negative effects, behind this blanket of love and compassion, and look at all these good things that we're doing and all of that. But that's not solving the issue of the damage, the mental degradation that is being done to 8 million people. It's not. It's just hiding what's going on,
Mhm.
and some of the stories you hear about the the the, the nasty effects that has long term on people. It's just shocking, absolutely shocking. And I feel for anyone who has had to go through that, like Atheist Mama Bear, who had to go through that for 15 years. And it's not a nice way to live, and it's not a very easy thing to to get past when you do leave. So kudos to her, because it just seems like she's found a way. She's woken up, and she's found something which she which she feels very strongly about, and that's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's a it's kind of a death cult in a way, because you think about the blood transfusion issue, you think about, you know, really everything about not being part of the world, not being a part of the solution of any of the world's problems. I mean, if you think about just at its extreme, if you just take it to its logical extreme, it's just another death cult. It's just basically human beings can't do anything for themselves, so you might as well just die, just give up on the world, give up on reality, give up on your life, and just hope that the next life is where it's going to get better. I mean, that's the basic core tenet of their faith, is that this life is garbage and it's all about the next life. And so anything in this life really doesn't matter. You know, don't take blood, die. You know, don't enjoy yourself in this life, just die. You know, and if you happen to live through the end of the, you know, the great tribulation, then so be it. But other than that, there's really no point to life at all. And that's no different than Jim Jones type of cults and David Koresh type of cults. And it's just, this life is garbage.
Yeah.
And it's the next life that really matters.
But then you ask, you know, you think back to when we were Jehovah's Witnesses, or you ask any like active Jehovah's Witnesses now, what is it that they're actually looking forward to in this new system? What is it that they're looking? What would bring them enjoyment? What is it this hope that they have? And they can't give you a clear answer over what activities they're wanting to do in this new world, in this paradise Earth, other than what the publications' pictures say, which is, oh, we're just going to lay around on a pleasant meadow, stroking a tiger and cuddling up with an elephant. It's, there's no clear activities that they're going to be doing other than worshipping God.
Yeah, it's so vague. It's kind of like heavenly hope thing with Christendom, where you just sit on a cloud and play a harp all day. It's like, there's no realistic viewpoint in this whole thing. It's just, they just tell you that whatever bad is in your life now is gone. That's enough. You don't die. You know, you live forever in a nice place. You know, that's it. You're with Jesus Christ in spirit on earth, and you just live in a paradise. And they make it seem so beautiful, but there's no realistic, you know, explanation for why we should believe that's the case. And even what, like you said, what does that entail? What is involved in all that? Where do I fit in with this paradise on earth? It's so vague. It's just it's like a general selling point that they try to sell you on, and it works, you know, because people know what they don't want. They don't want to die. They don't want to lose their loved ones. They don't want to keep living in this world because they feel like this world is hard and it's rough and it's tough and it's challenging. And the next world is so easy. It's like heaven on earth. Who wouldn't want that?
But when you think about it deeply, though, in a much deeper sense, it's illogical, because they say that without religion, there's no meaning in life. That religion brings that meaning. But when you ask them about what that meaning is, it is, as we say, either to sit on a cloud, stringing a harp, and worshipping God, or being on a paradise earth, you know, laying around on a meadow, stroking a tiger and worshipping God. Both of them have very little meaning to them other than worshipping a creator. There's no, you know, clear cut, you know, purpose to that, or anything that's going to, you know, bring any sort of enjoyment to the person's life or enjoyment to other people's life. It seems like there's no meaning there when you think about it deeply. But then they say that there's no meaning if you don't have the religion. But for atheists, you ask an atheist, what is your meaning in life? And they'll give you many different answers, but all of them have some purpose, some good, some, if you're asking a secular humanist or something, it's to help society and better the human race in some one way or another. If you ask someone like me or you, it's to spread knowledge about the damaging aspects of religion and thus promote critical thinking and logic, to be able to give these people that seem to have no meaning in life, to actually give them meaning and to actually have freedom again.
And the way I look at it is, what are the most valuable jewels that exist? Isn't it the rare ones? The most rare items are the most valuable.
Yeah.
And if life is abundant and you live forever, well, then where's the value in that? If life is just going to last forever, it's permanent, then it comes dime a dozen. It's just, there's no value in it, as opposed to understanding that life is short, life is tough, life is what it is. So you make the most of it. You try to make the most of this life that we have, and you value it, and you put a value on it, and you use it. You try to figure out what is the best way for me to live my life.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of examination. Examine, what is it that you like about your life? What is it that you want out of life? And understand that, well, we only have a finite time of this life. It could end tomorrow. So why don't we use each and every day to its best potential and do what's best for us? And you have to decide, everyone has to decide, what is the best way to live my life? And that, my friend, is where the real, if you want to call it a spiritual, psychological challenge and journey comes in, is finding out, what is it that you find value in life from? Is it not in the relationships you have with others? If you spend your whole life just isolated and spending it just on selfish pleasures, maybe you're going to find out that kind of life is empty, just like the religious people have kind of figured out too. Some of the wisdom traditions will tell you that, living a selfish life is kind of shallow and it's kind of meaningless. And a lot of people that are very, very wealthy end up killing themselves. Why would they do that? Because they figured out, they've kind of realized that, what, I can be selfish, I can be, but everyone's got to figure that out on their own. Everyone's got to figure out, what is it about this life that makes it worth living, and understand that it's rare. And then you start making the most out of it. Then you start, if your life is about social connections and being good to other people, if that's what makes you happy, and you eventually learn that, then you will do that with a fervor when you know that your life is limited. And it can be a more positive thing, I would say, than someone who thinks that they're like, hey, I have forever to be good to other people. I have forever to say I love you to my mom or to my dad, because they're going to live forever and I'm going to see them forever. Whether it's on earth or in heaven or whatever my theology says, I'm going to always see my mom and dad and my loved ones forever. Yeah. So why take the time out to express that?
And there's, following on from that, there's actually some good points here that I want to mention in the chat. So we've got, Trent Steers saying in the chat, my life's purpose is simple: leave this world better than I found it. Basically what we've just been saying there. When you've got a time period to your life, then you've got a short amount of time in which you either leave the world just the same as you found it, or you leave the world better than what you found it for the next generation. And that's a powerful thing when you think about meaning. But then we've also got Barely Protestant, who's saying, at Bored Skeptic, R.E. Scott's argument about limitation, meaning, value, does that mean the fewer days you have on Earth, the better? And I think, I don't know about whether, the fewer days, the better, because obviously you want to have as long a life as you possibly can. But when you're putting up lifespan versus eternity doesn't have the same weight as a lifespan does as far as meaning is concerned. Eternity, you don't really need meaning to live eternity. You're going to run out, no matter what your meaning is that you set. You're going to run out of time. You're going to run out of meaning before you run out of time because you've got eternity.
Right. You see, a very unexamined life, a very superficial way of thinking is someone to say, well, if this is all we have is 60, 70 years at the most, then why not just go eat, drink, and be merry? Because tomorrow we're going to die. So why not just live as selfish as you want and enjoy as many selfish pleasures as you can? Because after all, you're going to die tomorrow. So why not make the most of that?
Yeah.
That's a very unexamined and very naive way of thinking.
But just think about how selfish you could be, though, if you had eternity. I mean, you could just spend 2 million years, even, just focusing on yourself, not giving a shit about anybody else, and that wouldn't be a problem because you've got eternity. So that
just figure it out. Yeah, you've got eternity to figure out. Mm-hmm.
But you based, like Atheist Mama Bear, she's saying in the chat there, I sacrificed all the things that I wanted to do for nearly 50 years, and now I'm angry. I want those years back. And in eternity, that wouldn't mean anything. She's got another 50 million, 50 trillion, whatever, years to make up for anything that she lost in those 50 years. But because she's got a lifespan, she loses those 50 years, and that just makes it more important. That just gives her more conviction to be able to, do things that are going to help other people now.
It's kind of related to the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. If we just know as a brute fact that we're not going to live forever, then that, it's necessary that we're going to die. That's just a brute fact. We're going to die. We're not going to live forever. So we have to figure this stuff out in our lifetime. And if in our lifetime we figure out that all these selfish pleasures are not working for us, then we have to figure out what is working for us. And that's why we have the wisdom traditions that we do. That, people have limited lifespans and they've had to think a great deal about these things, knowing that. And, the thing about religion, though, is it gives you a false hope. And they sort of kind of want you to lead you to the same thing, just in a different way. Like, yeah, we should be kind to each other, not because it'll make you happy, but because it'll get you to heaven, But the thing about it is that even if there was no heaven, there was no afterlife, it still makes you happy to be nice to others. It still gives you a certain amount of satisfaction to leave the world a better place than the place you inherited it, right? That gives people purpose. That's what progress is all about. People, despite knowing they're going to die, they still try to make the world a better place. Why do they do that? Is it because they want to go to heaven? Really? I don't think so. I think it's just something innate in us, and we just tell stories to promote that. And I think one of the stories we tell each other is that, well, in the afterlife, we'll be rewarded for it. Well, I'm just here to tell you that as an atheist, I can tell you, even without an afterlife, you can still find motivation.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've actually got another caller coming up. We've got the Reverend Brother Heathen's Church of Heretics who is asking to call in. I've left a link in the chat for you there. If you click on that link and put in the password 420, you'll be able to join in with the stream. And yes, audio is just audio is okay. I'm doing all of this with just audio. He's saying, sorry, it only gives options for videos. If it's only giving options for videos, just don't click on a video link. Just leave that blank and just put in your audio options. I'm not sure how that works, Wes, because you came in yesterday without any video. So if you could have a chat with him, Wes, and just let him know how that works. Yeah, so as we were saying there, meaning to life. I think it's very important that when you're talking about meaning in life, that you think of a lifespan. I think it's very, you can't just get rid of the lifespan and then go, well, there's more meaning now. You definitely need that time span. There's a very important factor in that equation.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's everything. I think that for us, that's what motivates people to do anything, is the fact that there's a value to it. But there's not a value to it unless it's some sort of rare commodity.
Yeah.
If life is a dime a dozen, then life becomes meaningless. And basically, like you said, what's the meaning of living forever in a paradise if all you do is stroke a damn lion forever? I mean, what's the use in that? What's the value in that? I mean, it seems like much more value in life when we have challenges and we have a lifespan. We have, so many things to sort of the catalyst for change, the catalyst for growth. There's no growth if there's no challenge, if there's no danger, if there's no any of these things. These things are sort of play off each other, sort of play off each other. So to teach that, this is the evil part of life is kind of a false teaching. I think that, impermanence is part of what makes life meaningful. And it's what gives us meaning to do anything good. It's the whole basis for what we call is good and evil and wrong. Without these things, there's no referent. There's no way to build off each other. They depend on each other.
Yeah. Are you still having trouble getting in, Reverend? Because if you are, we can. I've got a Discord server, so I can put it onto Discord and send a link for Discord if that would be better for you. Just let us know in the chat if you need us to do that. Welcome to the stream, Neil. Can see you in there. Thank you very much for joining in. It's always great to have you drop by. If there's anyone here who hasn't checked out Neil the 604 Atheist channel on YouTube, please do. He does some amazing work over there, has some amazing conversations with people, where he does deconversion stories. I was on there a few weeks ago, and it's just an amazing community he's got going over there. Yeah, I think I'm going to put, because we're not getting Reverend in here, so I'm going to post a link to Discord in the chat.
I'll be back in a second.
Yeah. Yeah, Scott's going to be back in a second. He's just popped off for a sec. I'm trying to set up the Discord now. There's a link in the chat, Reverend, if you're still wanting to join in for that. Sorry that it wasn't working on OBS Ninja. Once you're in the Discord server, I'm in the friendly chat voice chat channel. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so as I was saying, Neil's channel, definitely check that out. He's got some great content over there. And we had Atheist Mama Bear in earlier, so if you're just joining in the stream now, she's over on TikTok. She's got some amazing stuff over there as well, so please check out Atheist Mama Bear. As I was saying earlier as well, if you are wanting to support the channel, I have a new merch store, which I have some merch over there. I've got a new line which I've just created this week, which is the Beware of the Apostate badge. So I've got badges, stickers, posters, T-shirts, canvases, and all of that sort of good stuff over there. If you just want to get rid of rid of Jehovah's Witnesses off your doorstep, or see them fleeing from you in the street, then definitely consider buying some of that stuff. We're still waiting on Scott to get back.
I'm right here. Sorry about that.
How are you doing, Scott?
All right.
Just shouting out the merch store and everything while we're waiting. I'm not sure whether we've got Reverend coming in. I have left a link to the Discord there if he wants to, but just checking. He's joined the Discord server, but I think he's got lost in the server. Yeah, if you scroll down on the, oh yeah, he sent me a message. 2 secs. I know he's it. I'll send him a thing. Do you want to jump over to Discord, Scott?
Jump onto Discord?
Yeah, and once you're in, just mute yourself in here. It's the friendly chat on the Bog Skeptic server.
Okay, did you send me a link to it?
It's in the chat.
Okay.
And then just mute yourself in OBS Ninja, because I'll still be taking the video from OBS.
Ooh. Trying to open the chat.
Yeah, so yeah, everyone can still hear me. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we're jumping over to Discord, just trying to get Reverend in. We're having some technical issues here. This is why I really need a moderator working in the background.
I'll see it.
We'll get that sorted in the next couple of weeks, though. He's trying to do a voice call with me, but I can't. I'm on stream, so I can't do a voice call with him in private. Yeah, I'm not liking Discord either, Wes. That's it's not the best Discord when it comes to streaming. It's not the easiest to use when you've got people trying to join in places and then they can't find the place. And Brother Heathen, I can't join a private Discord.
Yeah, I'm unable to open the chat up in here for some reason.
We can't get Scott in on that. Yes, friend, trying to guilt trip you. Yeah. Why aren't you here sorting this out for me? No, not to worry. We'll get that sorted for the next couple of weeks, as I say. That's is. What are you having trouble as well, Scott? Because what I can do is. No, I think Reverend's given up trying to get in on that. So I'm going to mute myself back over there. Yeah, Scott, I think Reverend's given up on that.
Yeah, not able to get the chat in here.
Yeah, this is why I need to set it up properly so we've got moderators and stuff. He should have been able to join. He should have been able to join on the OBS Ninja. It does take audio only, but you just got to. Yeah, he's saying he's not set up right now, so.
Right. Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. That's we're trying to make that work, but better luck next time, eh? Yeah. So is the anything else that we wanted to chat about, Scott? While we were here.
Not sure. I know that we were talking to Otangelo.
Yeah, I'm a little bit let down that he hasn't. He said he was going to come on today, and then he just hasn't shown up. So.
Yeah, I kind of prepared to have him actually have a conversation about some of the things he brought up, and I did a little research on just different perspectives on the same topic to give him something to think about.
You're home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd been doing a little bit of research into the abiogenesis as well, which he loves to talk about. How it's there's no evidence for it and that, but when you actually look into it, there's quite a bit of evidence for abiogenesis. It's not a full-on theory yet because I haven't been able to recreate it, but there's definitely an entire theory there as to how that happened originally.
Yeah.
And yes, like he says, the chances of it happening spontaneously are very low. But then the argument against that is that we are looking at it from a point of view as one. We have one occurrence of it happening. And so we're looking at it from a very small sample size, and then saying that the odds are very rare.
Well, it's kind of a play on Paley's old watchmaker fallacy. And it's just more recently in the 90s. We have Michael Behe back in 1996 claimed that the so-called flagellum, a bacterial organ that enabled motion, is irreducibly complex, is the way he puts it, in the sense that it cannot be the outcome of, just consecutive small-scale individual evolutionary steps, but they are allowed by standard, that there's some sort of intelligent standard behind it that must be the causal factor in why we have like that sort of factory in little cells. So he argues that these things have to be, or he concludes that an intelligent designer is likely intervening in the evolutionary course of events. But the thing is that the overwhelming consensus in modern biology is that these sort of challenges to Darwinian evolutionary theory can be met by naturalistic explanations. There's different biologists that actually went head on with Behe and Dembski, the people that actually came up with this irreducibly complex theory. And it's been argued that it can be, debunked, and it has been. We can show little step-by-step processes that can lead up to flagellum, and this has been demonstrated. And so these sort of arguments just don't stand up to the evidence, And I mean, it's very, like I said before, it's very intuitive. It seems like, humans create machines, therefore a superhuman created the machines of flagellum and on up the human body. And there's other things. You can look at all the pore design involved in just the human body, like the eye and the cancer that, the COVID-19 that we're fighting, all these different negative things in the world. Why is it we only focus on the good things?
Yeah. But it does, I mean, I find that them sort of arguments to be, to be quite fallacious, because if you follow it logically, so we say that, we must have been created because we see complexity, and then you follow the Bible's teaching that, God, created angels, and then the angels help God to create, life down here and all of that. So you go back up a step to the angels. And the angels are all discussing, we're complex because, we're more complex than humans. So we must have been created by something even greater than us. So then you move back up to God. And now you're up at God. Now, if there's God and God's wife, let's say they're having a conversation. Now, logically speaking, you follow the progression. They're more complex than any of the other things lower down in the list. So they're probably having the same conversation. We are complex. We're more complex than anything else. So logically, we must have been created by something more complex.
Right.
We're getting into a problem with infinite regression.
Right. So it's like baked into the logic is this assumption that, God is this super complex thing. And that in order for complexity to arise, like the complexity of the universe or complexity of human beings and life and things like that, that it requires by definition something even more complex. Well, then by that logic, where did God come from? Did God come from some super complex? So it's almost like God's all the way down. It's an infinite regress if you start taking that logic on. Like, how many gods are we going to have to, attribute to each god, that exists, because they're complex by definition. So, maybe it's the opposite that's actually true, that from more simpler beings do we emerge more complex. So it comes from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Yeah,
and that seems to be more sensible.
Yeah, and looking at it in those things, then if you look at how fallacious that logic is, that you're just going to keep going back and back, and there's always something more complex that has to create it. You have to come to a point where you just accept, and obviously Christians do this with God. Just accept the fact that there is something which doesn't need to be created. It's complex, but it doesn't need to be created. So why go to God for that? Why not just
because God
stop at us for that?
Right, because for what it takes to explain reality doesn't require certain necessary, there's only so many necessary properties that are necessary for emergent properties to come about. Like, it's not necessary for the the non-contingent, absolute thing that exists, if we want to call it that it has to be all loving, that it has to be all conscious, and it has to be all present, and it doesn't need all these unnecessary properties. The only thing it needs is to be all powerful, or at least powerful enough to create everything, or for everything to emerge. Like, it doesn't even have to be all powerful. It can just be powerful enough, potent enough to cause some little thing to happen that can then emerge into these other little things that can then emerge into these other things to get to the universe that we're at. Logically speaking, we don't know that at all is the case. But it seems like if you're going to just arbitrarily start giving this non-contingent, primitive, metaphysical thing that everything sort of comes from, then you have to kind of justify all these properties that you're attributing it to. Like, why does it have to be all loving? Why does it have to be conscious? And then they'll say, well, because we have love and we have consciousness, and then you run into another logical problem, which is the composition problem. We have the fallacy of composition, where we think that, like, if you have a round brick house, therefore all the bricks that make up that round house must also be round. Like, that doesn't follow. Like, we have a lot of round structures that aren't made of round bricks. So we know that composition fallacies exist. So you can't really say that God must be all the properties that we are. That's sort of making humans anthropomorphic, like making us the big center of it all. Like, we could just be an offshoot, just like it's kind of like the analogy that I came up with is kind of like with this fine tuning argument. It's kind of like saying the Empire State Building was fine tuned for this little piece of mold that exists in a centimeter space at the basement of its structure, that because some guy dropped a piece of cheese out of his pocket 2 seconds ago. Like, that's not why it was created. That just happened to happen within it. And it's the same thing, I think, with the universe. We're talking about a huge, incomprehensible, unimaginable number of possibilities that exist that we don't even know about. And we're thinking that all of that means it was all for us. Something about that seems kind of unrealistic.
Well, yeah, you're just coming back to the puddle analogy there, aren't you? It's stupid, and I mean, like, Trent saying in the chat there, they define their God into existence, just keeping out of range of our detection. And when you look at the progression of religion, that is exactly what that is exactly what's happened. I mean, back in early religion, God was just the forces that we didn't understand. And then you go to the Greek religions, and it's just the lightning and other things that we had no explanation for. So it's just outside of our knowledge range. But that must be God. And then you get to where we are today, where we can explain all of the natural processes that we used to attribute to God. But now we've hit an even bigger problem, because now we have to basically make up new attributes. We have to just, define things that don't exist into existence, and then attribute them to God to be able to say, well, that's what God is. Which is just an illogical concept. But we seem to have fallen into it because of this belief system that we've built up.
It's all intuitive. It's all emotional. It's all sort of like the reason why if someone gets in a really terrible car accident and they see their entire car just totaled, and they see all the damage around it, and yet they come out of that accident unscathed, not even a scratch. And this happens, And it's like people wonder, how could that happen? It's like big numbers, therefore God, or therefore the spirits, or therefore the magic, or therefore whatever, to explain how this thing happened despite all the odds that it should have happened. It's almost like a projection. It's like you're projecting your own bias onto the universe. It's like, suppose you're playing Russian roulette with some strange, mysterious people that kidnapped you. And despite the Russian roulette, you survived the whole thing. And if you're somebody who gives into the fine tuning theory or one of these theories, you would say, well, I guess that the people who captured me wanted me to live. Because, hey, after all, the odds were against me living. They played Russian roulette with 10 bullets. I should have been killed. But you survived somehow. So obviously you're going to project your awe of the fact that you live onto that reality. And it's not necessarily the case. It just isn't.
That's the thing with odds, though, isn't it? I mean, even if the odds are 1 quadrillion to 1, that you're going to that something will happen, that one will always come out. Given a large enough set of time, that one will always come out. The only time that it's illogical to think that something is going to happen because of the odds is if the odds are 1 quadrillion to 0.
It might be a statistical necessity. Like, it's just statistically necessary that we exist because the number's so great that we have to be the one. And it might, and then too, we get into this thing of arbitrariness. What are we calling life? We're calling life what we are. But if the universe was a little different and it was, baked into the initial conditions that gave rise to the universe, let's say if it was different, it was a lot different. And then someone would say, well, you wouldn't have life as you know it. Well, yeah, of course. But you'd have life as we don't know it, maybe.
Yeah.
Who's to say? It's always going to be kind of arbitrary. And it's always going to kind of look a certain way based on our position and relative perspective.
Yeah.
This requires a little bit of open-mindedness and just seeing it from a different perspective. And I think because people don't have that ability to step out of their own shoes, to look at reality a certain way, that they fail to see all this stuff in that light. And that's really where the problem is, I think.
It's when you're dealing with, as I've said before, it's when you're dealing with such a small sample size, when you're dealing with a sample size of one, one Earth, one human race, one set of intelligent life. You're dealing with such a small sample size. It's easy to start getting into the realms of special pleading. Or, well, we must be special. We're the only things that we see. And I'll be interested to see how, this argument evolves when we start to discover alien races.
Yeah.
Well, not when,
Absolutely.
if we discover alien races. I mean, the chances are, if you start getting into the realms of, the Fermi's paradox, then you're dealing with something that might happen, might not happen. That's not to say there isn't alien life. It's just the chances are against us to be with the universe being so large. But let's say we discover 2 or 3 different alien races within our galaxy in the next 1,000 years. I'd love to see how that would affect the argument for special pleading that we seem to have fallen into.
Absolutely. And like Trent Steer, I noticed in the chat, says it's like counting the hits and ignoring the misses. And this is like a classic, bias that people have. It's like every time I look at the clock, it says 11:11. But you forget that every time you look at the clock where it says a different number, but you only focus in on the times that it says 11:11 because you've put some sort of special significance on that number for some reason. And so you only remember the hits. You only remember every time I look at the call. No, it's not every time. You know, if you were to remember every time, you'd probably see that it's a little more less, you know, fantastic. That maybe it'll add up, you know, if you were to do that. So yeah, it's a human thing. It's like the reason we can train animals is because animals know that if they behave a certain way, that certain outcomes happen. Sometimes in reality, it just so happens things happen and we start, because our mind is kind of like pattern seeking machines. Well, what was I doing when that really bad thing happened? Or what was I doing when that really good thing happened? And you start putting these little pieces together. Oh, I was doing this. I was lying about this thing over here or doing some bad thing. And that's what caused this bad thing to happen.
Yeah.
And so you kind of put those two little things together and you start creating, you start training yourself to behave a certain way. Well, I'm going to stop doing this because every time I do this, it seems like this happens. And so that's where superstition starts coming up. Yeah. That's where we start having these superstitions. And animals do this. They even had a test where animals thought that when they behave a certain way, that water would fall out of the little pipe in the cage.
Yeah.
And so they started doing that behavior, and they noticed, wow, these animals are kind of superstitious because they've sort of trained themselves to imagine water comes out whenever they behave this way. And it wasn't. It was totally arbitrary on purpose in the test. But the animals decided to, you know, even animals are superstitious sometimes, depending on the animal. So we're no different.
There's two different ways for the brain to react to the, you know, the bad, you know, this is in psychology when you're talking about positive bias and negative bias. And when it comes to, you know, the brain obviously likes to focus on positive bias a lot more. So when positive things happen, you remember those things more than you do the negative things. Now, when it comes to negative bias, there's, you know, two different ways for the brain to react. One way is for you to explain it away, like you mentioned. You know, explain it away with, you know, silly things that aren't related, but, oh, well, that happened at the same time or at similar time, so I'm going to, you know, stop doing those things. Or there's just, your brain will just lock it away, and I think anyone who's been in my position, where you've gone through, you know, really heavy abuse in your childhood, you know, can attest to this, where the brain, because it's so bad, the things that are happening, that have happened, your brain tends to lock away some of those negative memories because it doesn't want to think about them. It's damaging the brain in some way by thinking about them. So it locks them away into little boxes. And, you know, that's where this counting the hits and ignoring the misses comes in, and it's very important. Because when you're, you know, purposely forgetting things because they're negative, and then not forgetting the positives because they're positive and the brain likes that, you know, you're never really sure, you know, if, you know, you're never really sure that you're not counting the hits and ignoring the misses, because there's always misses that you can't remember because your brain doesn't want to remember them.
That's right. I think they call part of that, they call in psychology attribution errors.
Yeah.
Where we attribute false things to causes and things like that. And we can make those very easily. And I'm afraid that a lot of superstition and religious thinking has a lot to do with those psychological processes of attribution error. I know that I have a lot of experience with people, even myself. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Even myself over the years, when I was very religious and when I was very spiritual minded, I would attribute certain experiences to certain things because that's just how my brain was wired up back then. I just wanted to believe certain things, and I would have these experiences, and they seemed to sort of reinforce those beliefs. So I understand how easy it is, and you know what gets you out of that is, first of all, wanting to know true things. Do you want to know the truth? Because that will motivate you to actually look at alternative causes for things, and how to avoid attribution error, and how to see things for what they are. And I think that's a healthy way to be. I think it's someone, if you're interested in truth, it can be a very enlightening thing for you. I don't see any downside to that. It's healthy skepticism. It's the way I look at it.
Yeah, definitely. We've got At the Cross in the chat saying he's going to be in place to give us a call in about 10 minutes. Are you wanting to stay on? And we are a bit over time now, but we can stay on if you're up for that, Scott, and
sure,
have a short conversation with him.
Sure, absolutely. You know, I have these conversations daily. Everybody says that, you know, that it's so clear that their God is very easy to discover. And my argument all the time is, great. So what is it that I'm missing? What is it that can show me that your God belief is not imaginary, but it's real? Because that's the claim. God is not imaginary, it's real. And it always boils down to, so far, it always boils down to either some subjective experience, or they'll look to the Bible, or they'll look to testimony from other people, or they'll, and all in all, I think every one of them will try to point out the flaws in your non-belief. They'll try to undercut the very reasons you have not to believe as a reason to believe, which is not a good argument. You know, for someone to say they don't know, they try to say, well, that's not an answer. That's the wrong answer. You don't know, that's the wrong answer. And they just want to lead you into, you know what the truth is, when you don't. And it's like, look, it's very simple. For me, it's very simple. How can we distinguish imaginary things from concrete things? Okay? You know, philosophical arguments are imaginary category.
Yeah,
if they are. They're of the category of imaginary or conceptual. That's not evidence. You know, I don't need a philosophical argument to prove that black holes exist or that dark matter is a thing. You know, we have evidence that these things affect reality, indirect evidence. We have something, right? We don't rely on philosophical arguments. You know, if you're saying that God is kind of like everything else, well, show me how God is like everything else. You know, I have yet to see that. I just hear a lot of argumentation in philosophy, and that's just cool. I mean, within a certain framework, it may sound valid, but it's just not sound.
And this falls into the power of belief as well. When you want something to be true, when you want to believe something so much that it just has to be true, your brain is going to do things to, you know, to prop up that belief, to make that belief seem true. And this is the problem with special revelation within religion, where people say, well, I experienced God. Well, how did you experience God? Or he came to me in a vision, he came to me in a dream, this thing happened, I saw this thing. And then you've got to ask the question, well, you wanted that to be true really hard. Then this thing happened where it was in a dream, or it was you saw something, even in, when you were conscious or what have you, you saw something and you attributed it to God relating to you. There's many different explanations as to why that could happen. I mean, one, you have misidentified what's happened. So you experienced a sound or a force or something that you didn't realise what it was, and your brain's now attributing it to the same thing that you want to believe so hard. Or you're hallucinating. Your brain, you wanted it to be true so hard that you hallucinated you've delusioned it into existence that is what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to tell, when it is a delusion, when you are that strongly wanting to believe something. But you have to ask
You
the
know,
question logically, what has more evidence? That God spoke to you, or, God came to you in a vision, or showed you a sign, or that you hallucinated and willed that thing into existence.
because we have, evidence of those sort of things happening. Like, there's people that will tell you, well, and by definition, I know that I speak to God. I know that I receive the Holy Spirit because, and it's in the Bible, the sign that this has really happened and that we can use as a measuring stick to know that I've actually spoken to God is because I can speak in tongues. And people will talk about how, hey, I speak in tongues. I can go to church and I can speak in tongues. Well, guess what? There's also a condition called glossolalia. And it's a practice in which people utter words or speech-like sounds, and it's thought by the believers to be languages of the angels or God. And in fact, there are atheists, people that used to be Christians and used to speak in tongues, that can still speak in tongues because they still know how to master the art of glossolalia. So this sort of proves that misattribution happens and that there's a psychological component to it. So if it's possible that can happen under the definition of what it means or what proves you're speaking with God or you're being affected by the Holy Spirit, if we know that, then why do we just have to assume that your personal experience
in the box
is from God, that it's not a misattribution? And I'm the first one to say people can have the so-called mystical experiences, and I don't deny them of that. But I just don't accept that their attributions are necessarily true.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and the speaking in tongues thing, I mean, the interesting thing with speaking in tongues is that when you listen to these people, they're always talking in the same sort of sounds that you would make in the language that they naturally speak. So in America, it's all sounds that you would make in general when speaking English. But it's just all gibberish. It's just all mixed up and in in a pattern that we wouldn't usually use in English. Whereas you'd think if it was actually like the language of the angels, for instance, you'd think it would be sounds that we wouldn't be able to naturally make, because this is a species which is not human.
Right.
But it's all sounds that we would naturally make as a human anyway.
Right. And all the excuses they'll give you only prove the unfalsifiability of the proposition. So they'll say, well, it's kind of like God's using you as an instrument. So you're a flute. A flute can only make one kind of sound. When you blow air through the flute, it's going to sound this way. Likewise, when God's Holy Spirit blows through you, you're going to sound like a human talking God's language. So they'll come up with all these excuses as to why, things are seem human, but seem also ineffable. Yeah. But something being ineffable doesn't mean that there's some sort of naturalistic explanation for it. There's a lot of ineffable things about nature. I mean, let's face it, consciousness itself is ineffable. That's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness, because no one can really figure it out. Really, it's ineffable. But we also know that it's all natural. It happens in the natural world. So nature has a way of doing some really amazing things that we don't always understand. It doesn't mean therefore God or therefore Jesus or therefore Allah or whatever. It just means that we don't have the full understanding. And there's nothing wrong with saying that.
Yeah,
That's the
definitely. I mean, it's. I mean, when you delve into it like as deep as what we're delving into it tonight, it's quite clear that it's illogical. A lot of these arguments. Now, if you're in the religion itself, and you're in the echo chamber of everyone having exactly the same thought processes that that you yourself have, then it's quite easy to to believe this stuff. It's quite because everyone else is having the same thoughts as you. And that's why I think, just tying back to what I was mentioning earlier, about echo chambers being quite bad, and how atheists and theists need to have these open conversations and this open dialogue, because it's the only way to start to work out what is actually true, by having two different arguments being debated in an open forum.
And what helps is when we can all kind of understand the limitation of language. A lot of these subjects, inevitably, it always comes down into these deeper examples of how things are, like consciousness and origins and how did life come from non-life? These really deep, mysterious. I mean, it's always going to steer into that direction. And so the language, I think it can be misleading on both sides. Like something I read not long ago was about science. And, there was a time before the 20th century when consensus science was probably what you call a hard materialist, mechanical view of reality. That reality was in total like this machine, this clockwork machine, very materialistic. And then, eventually some scientists came along and started postulating things like what would be described now as fields, that actually reality isn't based on things, more or less, but they're based on fields of, energy. And the materialist viewpoint did not have room for things like fields. They had room for things, like atoms were things, little hard objects that couldn't be broken, But then the mathematics also kind of alluded to that actually they kind of fall into probabilities rather than things. And for materialists, this didn't seem possible. This kind of went against the whole, the competition was, no, it's a field of probability fields, wave function. And then soon enough, it was discovered, and Einstein and Niels Bohr and so forth discovered fields and field theory and quantum field theory and all these things. Well, those fields kind of got smuggled into materialism, to where now materialism has no problem talking about fields of probability. That's part of the material world. So, but at the beginning stages, it was a big controversy. At the beginning stages, for the hard people that were hard on the language, they were just could not let go of the language. They could not allow for fields, But then eventually it was discovered that what's the problem is our language. Our language is like limiting reality. It's like we're trying to fit reality into this little language dichotomy that we have. Yeah. And maybe that really isn't maybe the smartest way to go about it. Maybe we should just stop with this whole natural, supernatural bullshit and just start seeing things for what they are. It's just reality.
And when you look at language, language is, we can look back and we can see how language has had to evolve to encompass. I mean, if you went back 500 years ago and started talking about quantum physics and, field theory and, the quantum entanglement and all, they wouldn't have a bloody clue what you were talking about.
bullshit.
If
It
we
would
start
be
talking about mobile phones and tablets and computers and,
yeah. There you go.
Windows and Mac and Apple and all,
There you go.
like, what the
Exactly.
fuck
It
are
would
you
be
going on
crazy.
about? But so you can see where you do need to allow, and I think that's where some people get a bit lost today. Is they're
Right.
not realizing that language needs to evolve more because we're now
There
getting
you go.
concepts which we can't express in language. It's not to say it's
Right.
illogical, it's just that the language isn't there yet.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that naturalism has failed. It doesn't mean that God, or therefore supernatural has, it just means that we get to now widen our perspective of reality. We get to understand that things are not, you know, confined to our little language barriers.
Yeah.
And, I listened to Sean Carroll's podcast, Mindscape, and it's very enlightening. They always talk about these subjects that, there's so much in science that was, and he's very fascinated by that topic that, it's so easy for people to understand, nature works this way and it's worked this way and it's been successfully understanding that things work this way. If we start now changing and trying to widen our view, the fear is, well, now you're just taking everything that we've built, our science, and you're just throwing it away. It's like, no, you're not really throwing it away. You're just kind of broadening. You're kind of making it better. You don't have to throw away your science because we've learned more science. you know, science, if anything's going to debunk old science, it's going to be more science. And it doesn't do that. I mean, the scientific method is what it is. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's part of the mystery of life, and it's part of what makes the whole endeavor worthy. But acting like we know all the answers and that reality has to conform to our little ideas and language to describe it is just religious thinking, and that's just limiting. At best.
I think we're going to have a caller. He says he's logging on at the cross. Is trying to get on. I will. Yeah. I'll try and get him on. I'll just post that link for him. And hope that he's able to get. I'm not sure whether he's trying to get in through Discord or through OBS Ninja. Don't have a lot of faith in Discord after the earlier fuck up with that. That's
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. How are you doing? We've got you in the stream.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
This is the Atheist Show?
Yes, we are an atheist show.
Okay, awesome.
How are you doing today? What were you wanting to chat about?
I want to talk about atheism.
About atheism, right? Okay, we're always happy to talk about atheism.
Okay, why are you an atheist?
Because I'm not convinced that the theist arguments are very convincing, to be fair. There doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence for it, and it seems to be very philosophical, with no tangible scientific evidence to support it. So my position would be is that without that, tangible evidence, there's no logical reason to believe it's true.
Okay, so do you hold the position that you lack belief?
Yes, right now I would say I lack belief, yes.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means I'm not convinced that there's a reason to believe.
belief. I think atheists are lazy when they say it.
Have you been talking to Darth Dawkins recently?
No, not at all.
Is it lazy to not believe in pink unicorns?
How does that apply to a God claim?
I don't know. If I'm not convinced that X exists, therefore I don't believe it. It could be God, pink unicorns, anything. Why would that make a difference?
I think it'd be childish to just jump to unicorn when we're talking about God.
Well, because they'd probably be in the same category of imaginary things.
No, it's not imaginary. Why would you just asserted that. You said it's imaginary. Can you demonstrate that it's imaginary?
No, what I'm saying is if you can't point to something as a concrete, then it's by default imaginary.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, it's not for us to prove that something is imaginary. It's for you to prove that it's not imaginary. That's what, you know, that's why you need evidence. That's, you know, why, you know, we don't just believe in things like we said, leprechauns and unicorns and all of this stuff, because there isn't evidence there, so it hence is imaginary.
Okay, well, would we agree that there is either a God or no God?
Yeah, that's a true dichotomy.
Yeah.
Okay, then the position of lacking belief or the absence of belief is either untrue or just a lazy stance to take because you don't want to argue from a real position.
I would say it's an honest position. And the reason I say that is if you take a test, like a math test, and you have a multiple choice, and you were given, you know, at least two answers, one of them is correct, one of them is false. You know that. But let's say you don't know what the answer is. Then for you to answer one way or the other would be a guess. And a guess is not knowing. A guess is just making a guess. So when it comes to the God thing, we're not making a guess. We're just admitting we don't know. Does that make sense?
No, because we already agreed that there is...
I mean, we agree that it's either God exists or God doesn't, but if we don't know, that's a mental state. And the mental state is something that we do know. And if we don't know the answer to something, then we're only speaking honestly to our mental state, about our mental state. But we're not saying that either God exists or doesn't exist. We're just admitting that our mental state is we don't know. We don't have enough information to know one way or the other.
Okay, so you're then admitting that there's, or taking a position that there's no God, because it's either a God or no God. There is no gray or middle area.
Yeah, it's either that God exists or God doesn't. And the atheist position is we don't know. So it's really, for me, my agnosticism informs my atheism.
Well, then by you saying you don't know, then would just be a direct correlation to just saying there's not a God, because there either is a God or no God.
Well, I would say that we're talking about belief. Atheism is a belief. So I would say I don't know, therefore I don't believe. Either way. So if someone was to say, like I argue with atheists all the time, and they say, there is no God. And I argue with them just the same way as I do with the theists. I say, you don't know that. You don't know if there's no God. That's your opinion. And if you do know that there's no God, then you have to demonstrate that. So they have a burden of proof.
Yeah.
And if they can't show it, then they don't know it. And no one that I know of has surveyed the entire universe to know that there is no God, at least by all definitions that they know of.
Yeah.
So they cannot say that there's no God fitting every description of God, from what I understand so far. But it's the same thing with the other side. To say that there is a God, I would have to say, why do you know that there's a God? So we have yet to hear the proof or to see the evidence for why there's a God.
Okay, and so then where did you find the ability to ground that claim? Because that seems like there needs to be some intelligence involved to say that I don't know a God exists. But how can you do that without a source of knowledge and intelligence?
The source is an experience. So my mental state of knowing things or not knowing things is from experiential knowledge. So I experience firsthand that I know things and I don't know other things. And so when I say I don't know things, I ground that in the fact that I don't know it, that experience of not knowing, that's an experiential knowledge. And so my describing that is language. So I can use logic to try to break it down to describe it. Logic is language. So I can describe that, but it's based on an experiential knowledge.
Okay, so then I'll go back to my original argument. It's more comfortable for you as an atheist to say, I don't know, because then you don't have to argue from a position, and you can just take, a position of, I don't know, rather than saying I do or I don't believe. Is that correct?
But if you make an argument and you don't know, but and that's the honest answer, and you make a positive claim, whether it be that God exists, or you make the positive claim that God doesn't exist, but you don't know, you don't have the evidence to back it up, how can that be an honest answer? Isn't it more honest to just say, well, I don't have the evidence as of yet, so I'm going to wait until I do have evidence one way or the other?
Well, I would say that's the problem with this new atheist movement, is this lack of evidence thing. Because plenty of evidence is provided, is put in front of you, and you deny it no matter what. So it's not a matter of not having evidence. It's just you deny the evidence because you want to take the position of, I don't want to have to argue from an actual position.
When we talk about evidence, different evidence has different weight. So philosophical evidence and experiential evidence does not hold the same amount of weight as tangible scientific evidence would hold. And that's what we're not denying, that there's philosophical arguments for God, and there's philosophical arguments against God as well in the same respect. We're not arguing that, we're not rejecting the evidence at all. We're just saying that, okay, that's one part of the evidence that would be needed. Now, for this, for this claim, which is a very big claim that God exists, it has a lot of weight behind it, and it would, affect our lives in a very specific way, in a very big way as well. So we can't just take philosophical and experiential evidence. We're going to need tangible evidence to go with that.
Right, and then that's what I just said, is that there's plenty of evidence that's put in front of atheists every single day. And just because you won't accept it doesn't mean there's not evidence. Doesn't mean it's not true.
As
but then you take it, then you take it to a further step and say, not only am I going to not accept it, then I'm going to take this lazy, convenient position of I don't know, or I haven't been provided evidence, when you truly have.
Can you give me an example of the evidence that you're referring to?
See, I have not come across any evidence. No one has put any evidence before me personally that that you're talking about. So, could you please provide some of this tangible scientific evidence that you think that there is?
Oh, sure. There's plenty of evidence, and I know atheists don't like to talk about the Bible, but the Bible's a historical fact. It happened, and I know you want to deny it, but it is what it is. And then we have things like the Kalam cosmological argument. And I know, again, you want to deny it. But again, those are pieces, at least, of evidence. And just because you deny it doesn't mean, therefore, it is not evidence.
I fail
Well,
to
you're
see
correct.
how either of those are tangible scientific evidence. I mean, yes, we can agree here that the Bible itself and the Quran itself are, tangible evidences in the sense of they exist. Those two books do exist. And historically, we do know that they were written at particular time periods in the past. So historically, yes, they are tangible. But the information that is provided in those books, there is no tangible evidence that I'm aware of to back up what those books say. And you're coming into a problem with the Bible, let's say, for instance, where the Bible is making claims about God's existence and claims about Jesus and miracles and things that have taken place in the past. But there is no evidence to back up either of those claims. So the books themselves are making the claim, and then you're getting into a circular argument by using the book that makes the claim to back up the claim. Now you're in a circular argument problem.
Right. See, the thing is that there's evidence, and then there's good, strong evidence. There's a range of evidence from weak to strong. I think that the strongest evidence is when you can predict something, novel prediction, and it can be repeated time and time again. That's part of the scientific method. That's one good way of evidence. Now, that's not the only evidence. There may be other strong forms of evidence that I don't know of that can prove God's existence. Do you know of some strong evidence that can prove God's existence?
Okay, well, I brought up the Bible, and again, like I said, I know that'll be denied. But then I also talked about the Kalam cosmological argument that nobody addressed, because I think that is a very simple way to show or at least provide evidence of the existence of a God.
I think I
Can you
did
go
address
ahead?
it. I didn't address it at the time because I had addressed it earlier. And the problem with the Kalam cosmological argument is that it's philosophical evidence. So I accepted that there is philosophical arguments that could suggest that there is a God, but they are purely philosophical. Now, the problem with philosophical arguments is that you need tangible, scientific, naturalistic evidence to back those up. You can't just use them as evidence on their own. They do not stand up on their own.
So
what is the premise of the cosmological argument?
You're demonstrating my proof for me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what any Christian or any theist puts in front of you in regards of evidence. You are going to disregard it, discount it, and then throw it away.
No, I didn't disregard it. You're not listening.
And then take the position of I don't know, because that's the comfortable position to take, because then you don't have to defend a position.
No, I'm sorry, but you're not listening to what we were saying. What we were saying is that we accept that there is philosophical arguments out there. We're not rejecting those arguments. We're just saying that there needs to be more on top of that. That is not strong enough to convince us. The whole thing with making a claim, like the claim of God existing, is that you need to be able to present arguments and to present evidence which is going to convince other people. You can't decide what should convince other people and what shouldn't convince other people. It's up to the strength of the argument itself and whether or not it will convince that person subjectively. Now, subjectively, we are not convinced by the Kalam cosmological argument. We're not convinced by the Bible. What we're asking for is, can you provide anything else which will make your case stronger?
For example, the Kalam cosmological argument, what is the premise in that argument? You know it. What is that premise? What is the first premise?
Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause.
Okay. So suppose we, for the sake of argument, grant that. Suppose we say, yeah, the universe seems to, an expansion of the universe started, right? Because that's as far as we know, is that an expansion started, right? So how do we get from that to God?
Well, I don't see expansion anywhere in there. It says whatever
No, it's not
begins
in the
to
argument,
exist.
it's in what we know. So we know that the expansion of the universe started, right? Would you agree?
We know what
Did
begins
the
to
universe,
exist has a
did the
cause.
universe begin
But
to
no,
expand?
you don't get to insert your own opinion. So it's whatever begins to exist has a
Right.
cause.
No, he's inserting what we know scientifically to be
expand.
true. It's not his opinion.
Right. So right now, when you say the universe, or well, first of all, let me ask you: are you saying that the universe began?
Whatever begins to exist has a
I
cause.
understand. I would agree. I would grant you that premise. Let me ask you: did the universe begin to exist?
I would say that whatever begins to exist has a cause. So God
No.
would be the cause of everything.
You're avoiding now. You're deflecting.
No, I
I'm
just
just
answered
asking
your
you a
question.
very simple question. Did the universe begin to exist?
Yes, I just answered that question.
Okay,
Whatever
so
begins to exist
so how
has
do
a
you know
cause,
that?
and that would be
How do
a
you-
God.
How do you know that the universe began to exist?
The same reason you said that it just started to expand.
No, I said the expansion began. I didn't say the universe began. I said the expansion began. Because that's all we really can measure is the expansion. We can't measure beyond that. The universe was in a different
And
state.
taking the Kalam down to its core, whatever begins to exist has a cause. So whether it's the universe, humanity, it has a cause.
Yeah, the universe caused the expansion of itself. How is that contradictory?
Say it again.
I said, if you don't know that the universe began to exist, and you only know that the universe began to expand, how is there a contradiction in that? How is it a contradiction to say that the universe always existed?
So the universe caused itself to be itself?
The universe didn't have to cause itself. The universe could have always existed, just like your God.
Yeah.
Okay, well then, if you're going to make that claim, then you have to provide the same evidence you're asking me for.
No, we can just say we don't know.
Okay, well then say that.
We can just say, I don't know whether the universe always existed or not, just like I don't know if there's a God that always existed or not.
Okay. So,
all we know
so
is that the
whatever
universe
begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist.
Then prove
we
that.
don't know that.
How do you prove that? How do you make that a concrete claim that the universe
physics,
began?
You know, within physics, what we know is what we can see, and we can see.
As atheists, you can't.
No, we just said that we can grant you that everything that began to exist has a cause, but you have to now demonstrate that the universe began to exist. Can you do that?
Yeah, God.
That's
okay.
Not
demonstrate.
That's not demonstrating.
That's what I'm asking.
That's
You
just
understand the
giving
claim?
an answer.
Demonstrate it.
Demonstrate what? God?
God created the universe. Demonstrate that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can you?
You're
arguing by assertion.
We've given you the argument. We've given you the argument. There's the
Bible.
Bible.
I know the argument.
There's the Bible. There's the Quran. They all line up. And if there's a universal source of knowledge and intelligibility, just because you don't accept the evidence for the intelligibility doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Let Scott speak for a sec, please. You know, he's starting to get a little bit ahead of yourself.
That all things that began to exist has a cause. We granted you that. What I'm asking you is to please demonstrate that the universe began to exist. And if you can demonstrate that the universe began to exist, I want you to demonstrate the property that caused the universe to exist. So you've got two claims right there.
Scott, atheist, you want to accept it. You want to accept the God that is the source
I will
and the
accept it if you
foundation of
can
all this.
demonstrate it. I will accept it if you can demonstrate it.
Well, no, you already said earlier that you won't because I
No,
gave you
I did
evidence
not say that. I did not say that. I said you will have to demonstrate it. If you can demonstrate it, I'll accept it gladly. I want there to be a God, to be honest with you. So please demonstrate it.
Okay, again, I put this in front of both of you earlier, is we have the Bible, which is rich in evidence, and you won't even consider that. Then when we start talking about an absolute universal creator God, you won't consider it because you can't wrap your head around it.
And again,
why
we're
should
going
I
to say
accept something I can't wrap
we
my
are
head around?
considering it, but we're not convinced by it. And
right, if we can't wrap our head
the
around
Bible
it,
and the Kalam cosmological argument, you haven't actually delved any deeper into. I mean, I'll grant you have delved a bit deeper into the Kalam cosmological argument for us, and thank you for that. But you've gone back to the Bible again, and you haven't delved any deeper into this evidence that you say exists within the Bible. What evidence are we meant to be looking at in there?
Well, that's the thing, as atheists, you do not have the ability to ground this. You don't, because you will not reference the point of all authority and all intelligence, which is God. So you can't have this conversation and it be intelligent.
No, I've already grounded intelligibility into experiential knowledge. So that's a non-contradiction. So what we have
because then atheists turn around and tell people.
1 second, so you'll understand where I'm coming from. So I ground my epistemology in the fact that I exist. I know I exist because I have experiential knowledge that I exist. I couldn't be talking about existing if I didn't exist in some form or another. So that's all you need. That's all I can possibly do is know that I exist. Everything after that is an inference. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to make some ontological claim outside of my existence that you have no access to and that I have no access to. At least you're not showing it. You're trying to show it through an argumentation, but the argumentation is not demonstrated by the premise. The premise is that everything that began to exist had a cause. Great, I grant you that. So show me how the universe began to exist. You can't do that. You just simply go back into your circular argument that everything that began to exist had a cause. Well, we already know that. We're going in a circle.
Yeah, and before
that's great.
And
before,
just a minute, at the cross, just a minute, right? Before you continue on, yeah, I'll just like to jump in and say that I'm going to be closing the show down in 10 minutes. So you get some of your final thoughts out, please.
Okay. So what Scott just said is that he has his own personal experience, that he knows his reality, as is an atheist. But I hear atheists attack theists many times, telling them that their personal experience means nothing when it comes to evidence. So now your evidence is shot down, and it's void at this point. So
nope. I'll show you why.
When we go back to it, I have, and many theists before and after me will probably present you with evidence after evidence after evidence, and you won't accept it because you don't want to, or you can't because from the atheist worldview, you don't have the intelligence or the ability to ground it because you don't acknowledge God.
It sounds
so
like
here,
you have a view of an atheist worldview and what that worldview is like. But there's many different views that come from the atheist camp. But you're putting them all into one view, and it seems like your dogmatic view of what you think atheism is just turning you round on a roundabout. Because time and time again, you keep coming back to us and saying that we keep rejecting what you're saying. Whereas if you listen back to this, we haven't rejected anything that you've said. We've just said that we need more evidence on top of what you've already said. We've granted you quite a lot in this conversation, but you keep acting as if we haven't granted you any of that.
Right. Let me give you an example. I have experienced that I exist, right? That's just my personal experience. Let me ask you this. Do you think I exist?
What does that have to do with your personal
Well, I'm
experience?
going to get to it. Let me just answer it. Yes or no. Do you think I exist? Do you know I exist?
Via audio and a camera, I
Perfect. Hey,
maybe.
Katie, do you think I exist?
Yeah, well, from the best knowledge that I have, the best evidence I have, yes, you do exist.
Perfect. So we've got 3 witnesses right there that I exist. Myself, you, and Katie. And we probably have many, many others, my family members, my friends, all sorts of people I work with and interact with daily that say I exist. That's all evidence that I exist. Now, let's compare that to an experience that you said I reject from some religious person that might say they spoke to God. You say that I reject that they had that experience. Number one, I don't reject that they have that experience. I reject the attribution that they spoke to God. Why? Because I didn't see them and I didn't experience them speaking to God. Neither did anyone else I know of. So it's basically hearsay. It's just their story against what I know or don't know. So I
Absolutely.
would just say I don't know.
You
I don't
exactly.
know.
You don't. You don't have. You don't have the ability to again ground that claim
Their
because,
experience. I don't have the
you
ability
didn't
to
have
ground
it,
their
right?
experience.
But
Right.
it doesn't mean you weren't real. Doesn't mean you didn't
Right.
exist. It just means
Right.
that they weren't there for it. It's the same thing with the God. It doesn't mean
Right.
he doesn't exist.
There
He
you
doesn't exist
go.
just because you
You're
haven't
getting it.
been there.
That's exactly what me and Katie are saying. Is
Okay.
that we're
Then
not
I have
saying
no
that
idea.
God doesn't
Then
exist.
how are you an
We're
atheist?
not
Then how
saying
are you
that
an atheist?
Because
Wait,
we're not
hold on.
making a positive claim that God doesn't exist. That would be hard atheist.
Right.
We're
Right.
not,
It
we're
goes
not
the
making
other
any
way, too.
claims
Right.
whatsoever. We're just not convinced of the claims that are being made towards us.
Well,
Perfect.
no, because Scott, the example you just gave was showing that you do exist.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
Right. So I know I exist, and there's evidence among other people objectively. So my experience is subjective, and then there's other minds that also agree. So this makes objective evidence that I exist. Now, with God, there are people who claim that they had some subjective experience of God. I don't know that. I have no access to their mind. So I can't say that that is an objective truth. I can only say that that's their subjective experience, which I'll grant them that gladly. But I don't know whether that's an objective fact that they actually spoke to God or not. And the other thing, too, about good versus bad evidence is, again, good evidence can be predicted, and it can be novel, and it can be tested, and it can be repeated. So if I can pray to God to go strike lightning to my tree out in my backyard at 5:01 every day consistently, that's evidence. All I need that God is true, that God is real. That's all I need. But that never happens. So I need some other way to differentiate the imaginary God from the real God. Do you know any way to make that differentiation?
Look, I know we're on a time crunch, but to go back to what you just said, it's you argued my point for me is that you don't have, or whoever's observing you in that position, they don't have the intelligence and the ability to say that there is or is not a Scott in that position, right? You realize that?
I don't understand what you mean. So, so the example I gave,
No, I know the example you
this
gave because
experience.
you talked. So they're in that position. There either is a Scott or there's no Scott,
Correct.
right? So then you had a couple people verify that there was a Scott, but then everybody else, maybe they say there's not a Scott.
if someone says there's not a Scott? I said, my example was that you and Katie verified my experience by saying that they too understood. Like if I experience God, for example, let's say I experience God striking lightning to my tree every day at 5:01 p.m. every afternoon for the last 5 days. My evidence could be, number one, I experienced it. That's the first piece of the evidence. The most weakest would be my own personal subjective experience. But let's say you and Katie also came to my house and witnessed it every day. Well, that makes my case a little stronger. That's stronger evidence. So remember, that's what we're arguing here. Weak versus strong evidence. So just me experiencing God striking my tree and then there's no way for me to verify it, that's weak evidence. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I may believe that it happened every time. But for Katie, maybe, they're not going to believe me. But if Katie and you and others saw that same thing every day, 5:01 happened, that's stronger evidence that that happened. Wouldn't you agree?
I unfortunately don't follow your line of thinking.
Did you understand what I said?
Yeah, I understand what you said. Definitely.
I mean, it sounds like maybe you don't want to understand what I said.
No, I've been listening attentive the whole time.
So I'll try it again. If I experience God striking my tree in my backyard at 5:01 p.m. every day, my personal experience of that to someone else, like to tell Katie or tell you or tell someone else, that might just be weaker evidence because it's just based on hearsay.
So what you're saying is you want a tailor-fitted, custom-fitted measure of evidence.
That's just one example. It's just one example
that I'm trying to say is if you have experiential evidence, you have an experience of something. Let's say, for in this, this example, you have an experience of God. For other people to be convinced by that argument, you're going to need justification for that, not just the experience itself. You're going to need something to justify the reason for that experience to be God.
But to go back to what I was saying, you don't have, like, you can't ground that. You can't ground that.
Why can't
you don't have the intelligibility. You do not refer to an ultimate creator, an ultimate God that is the source of your intelligibility, your logic, any of that. So
now
it's nonsense.
Well, now you're moving the goalposts. Now you're moving away from an evidential argument to a presuppositional argument, aren't you?
No, it's still evidence based. Because I brought that up because the evidence still aligns with what I said.
But it sounds like you're moving the goalposts. It sounds like now that we've kind of got the evidential thing down, now you want to move it back down to presuppositional, which is fine. You can have started with that one. That's really the presuppositional argument is the basis of what you're really talking about. The evidential doesn't matter. Because even if my presupposition is ungrounded, then it doesn't matter what evidence I bring up anyways, because no evidence is going to count as evidence if I don't have a grounding to identify what evidence is. If I don't even know how to make a truth statement, if I can't even say what's reasonable because it's not grounded in anything, then what difference does it make about evidence? Evidence has nothing to do with it. Right?
Yes.
Right.
I said that when I first called in. When I first called in, I said that.
Well, that's the problem. Is that's a viciously circular thing. Let me ask you this: how do you know you experience God?
I know I've experienced God. Revelation.
Revelation. How do you know that God revealed Himself to you?
Because I trust God's voice.
So you trust God's voice because you trust God's voice? That's circular, sir.
Yes, just like You probably
No,
trust your mom and dad's voice, and I trust my mom.
It doesn't
So
matter.
it's the same thing.
Well, you've already granted that I'm already out of the picture. I'm already circular. We already know that. What I'm asking you,
I was using the humanistic example. But go ahead.
but how do you know? How do you know that you can trust God's voice? How do you know that? How do you know that that's God's voice and that you can trust it?
Because it's there, it's ultimate, unfailing, and always present.
How do you know that?
Because I experience it every single day.
So you're just circular. You're in an epistemic circularity, sir.
Okay, that has nothing to do with you not believing.
You know, your grounding for anything is the fact that you exist. That's the truth. Because if you didn't exist to begin with, you couldn't know anything, right?
Well, no, you can't know anything because you can't reference
I
a
admit
creator or a God.
But I admit that I exist, and the rest is an inference. You, on the other hand, are trying to dig deeper. You're trying to go into something you have no access to. You're trying to go beyond your existence. You're trying to go to ontology of your existence. That you don't know.
It's the explanation. It's the explanation of my existence and your existence. You just want to admit it. You want to acknowledge it.
What you're doing is you're trying to have a battle of the worldviews. You're trying to say that my worldview is superior to yours because it's grounded in something make-believe that I made up that's more stronger than yours. That doesn't work, though. In logic and philosophy, that doesn't work. Presupposition, if you define the word presupposition, it's an assumption. An assumption, a presupposition, is to believe something that has no grounding. Okay? So right there, you're contradicting yourself. If you admit that it's a presupposition, it doesn't mean anything. You're just trying to have a battle of who's got the most powerful laser gun right now.
No, that's just a tag and a label that Christian theists want to put onto it as presupposition, and that's not what it is. We just understand, and we acknowledge and have the knowledge that the God exists, but you can't, or you decide not to.
The bottom line, though, sir, is that what you're suggesting is a thing tacitly assumed beforehand at the beginning of a line of argument or a course of action. So that's a presupposition. You are tacitly assuming God beforehand, before the beginning of your argument for anything is God. That's a presupposition by definition.
Right.
So it seems like we don't have
to presuppose God when God already exists.
Just to jump in quickly, because this seems like it's going to be going on a little bit longer. We're over time now, quite a lot over time. I'm going to be shutting down the show in a minute, so I'll give you and Scott, as soon as you've been arguing this with Scott Moore, I'll give both you and Scott a minute to give some closing statements, and then I'll be closing down. So if you want to go first, at the cross, then you've got a minute.
I spoke last. Scott, go first.
Okay, you want to go ahead, Scott?
Sure. So I would just want to make sure that it's understood that I don't disagree that people have experiences. Like if you have some sort of mystical vision or experience that happens to you, I just remain skeptic about the attribution because I don't have access. So it goes back to agnosticism and atheism. Basically, our position is we don't really know the origin of what caused the expansion of the universe. It could just be that the universe was in a different state, and that's what caused. Let me put it this way: there's multiple models to explain the expansion of the universe. Everything from a cyclical universe to a multiverse to anthropohedron model. There's quantum foam theories. There's all sorts of mathematically valid arguments for why the universe began to expand. God is just one, but God doesn't have any valid mathematics behind it. God doesn't have any sort of attribution to the natural world. It's kind of like a placeholder. It's more of an argument from ignorance. And so that's where we're coming from. We just simply say we don't know, not because we're lazy or because we don't want to believe. I actually want to believe in a God if I could, but I just don't have enough evidence to be genuine when I say that I believe in God. And also, I don't want to inherit that burden of proof. That's why I don't say there is no God. I don't say there is a God. It's just one of those things of the world that I don't know. I'm agnostic.
Right, do you want to go ahead at the cross, give some closing statements?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
I'll keep mine brief. Thank you for letting me talk and have a discussion. And yeah, hopefully I can come on if you guys do this again and talk again.
Yep,
That'd be great.
That'd be brilliant. We're going to be doing this every week on a Friday, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time starting. So if you ever want to call back in, you're more than welcome to. Thank you very much. Yeah, right.
All right.
So, yeah, I'm going to be closing down the show. So, we've been going for like 2.5 hours now. So, nice long show for everyone. Thank you very much for everyone who's called in, and thank you very much for everyone who's been in the chat. We've had a really good conversation going in the chat there as well. So, thank you very much for that. Hope you've enjoyed what we've done here tonight. If you want to, join us again next week, we're going to be doing the Zero-One show every week, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and usually going for around about 2 hours or so. So definitely join us again next week. As I mentioned earlier, I have a new merch store up on my website, www.borgskeptic.co.uk. And I have some new stuff on there, including the Beware of the Apostate stickers, canvases, t-shirts, things like that. Or if you just want to have a t-shirt or what have you with my logo on it, which West Disturbed Van very kindly made me a really nice logo. So if you want that, then that's on there as well. Again, thank you to everybody, and please remember, ignorance is never bliss. Thank you, and good night.
Good night, folks.
Fight for your values and fight for your friends. Fight through this blight, find the light at the end. Through the age of the dragon, the people will talk of the day they were saved by a hero named Hawk. Take a seat and I will recite you a tale of bold adventures spanning both sides of the veil. I knew a champion, we traveled far and wide. We saw so many wonders roving side by side. In the streets of Kirkwall we brought help to those in need. Word had spread so quickly of our dealings and our deeds. Fight for your values and fight for your friends. Fight through this blight, find the light at the end. Through the age of the dragon, the people will talk of the day they were saved by a hero named Hawk. Hawk, 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 Hawk. Into the deepest roads we ventured in the black. If we had only known what we were bringing back. We felt the fire of every temper, every mage. their politics and rage. Had to pull some strings and get them off each other's backs. There was so much greater danger waiting to attack. Fight for your back.